So let's do a spiritual mind treatment together, knowing that our words have power, so we choose them carefully. We make certain that they convey the message that we intend for our own clarity and for a successful demonstration. So I'm going to speak these words in the first person now, that you may take them as your own. I know that there is a power for good in the universe, and that I can use it in every moment of my life. I know that it contains within it the peace, the prosperity, the love and compassion, the creativity that are boundless in universal mind. And that within me these same gifts have been given to acknowledge, to bless, and to use in my own life. So with this recognition and unification, I speak my declaration in each spiritual mind treatment that I do, declaring an intention, utilizing the spiritual practice that I have developed, and then releasing it to the universe with positive expectation of its arrival in my life, fully expressed for me to use. As I think about this, I realize that that's the true communion or connection with my source of being. That I am clear, that I have positive self-expectancy, that I recognize my value both in speaking it and in receiving it. So that as I utter these words of acceptance, I know that it is truly meant to be in my life. Not only do I accept that, but I realize that I am worthy of it, deserving of it. For after all, God and I are one. So as I release these words now into the law of mind in action, I do so in perfect trust and faith. For I know that the thoughts formed, the words spoken, are the action taken. I rejoice that this is so. And together we affirm, and so it is. Our theme for the rest of this month of April is the physiology of spirituality. And today's topic is the mind-body connection. Before I begin, though, I'd like to share with you the definition of the word physiology as I'm using it in this series of talks. Physiology is the way in which a living organism, or a body part, functions. Second definition, physiology is dealing with the functions and activities of living organisms and their parts, including all physical and chemical processes. And then the third definition, physiology, it means the science of the normal function of living things, the study of normal mechanisms and their interactions which work within a living system. And so I'm going to suggest that, first of all, you keep these definitions of physiology in mind as we go through this month, because this is, well, let me put it this way. It's funny that I never thought of this approach before. In fact, I've danced all around it, to be honest with you. And sometimes I've danced with one part or one author about it at a time. So this past week, Gail Fujimoto and I were discussing the music for this month, and it occurred to me that this idea of mind-body connection was a whole body of knowledge. No pun intended there. It deserves its own focused attention to the magnitude and the importance of it. So as I began to gather material for this series, I went first to my own library, and I began to pull books off the shelves that related to these topics in some way. And when I say these topics, let me share with you what the rest of the month's topics are. Today is the body-mind connection. Next week is the power of human consciousness. On the 22nd of April, we'll be exploring the quantum leap in healing. And then on the 29th, building the new. So all of those related to the physiology of spirituality. Anyway, as I'm pulling books out to plan for the month, before I knew it, I had 17 books on the table in the dining room. And that didn't even include the Science of Mind text. In fact, it didn't even yet include any of Ernest Holmes' writings. So a wide variety of different authors and different titles. Not because Dr. Holmes doesn't talk about the physiology of spirituality, because he does, but because my intentions are to address how widespread this concept is in metaphysics. So let's begin with this week's topic, the mind-body connection. So what does that mean to you? For many people, it means, well, my head sits on top of my body and my brain's up there. And for many, the belief is that the mind is sequestered in the brain. And while it's true that the brain is a magnificent organ or system, without the heart to nourish it, the lungs to aerate it, the systems that feed it sight, noise, touch, and so on, it has nothing to function with. Which is another way of saying that the brain, too, is interdependent on the other functions of the body, just like the other organs and systems are. Now, don't get me wrong. I agree that the brain is a magnificent creation. And the mind that created it, and the mind, capital M, capital I, capital N, capital D, mind, the mind that created it and its support system is the mind, capital M once again, which creates all life and sustains it in all living things. Since that's true, then this mind, capital M, must be in that which it creates in order for the creation to function. And if it's in that which it creates, then logic leads us to the realization that the individualized mind, that is you and me, that the individualized mind must be in all the organs and the systems that I am made up of in the physical expression I call my body. Bingo. Bingo. Now I understand the word metaphysical. The word meta means after or beyond. It's a prefix that we use in the English language to indicate a concept which is an abstraction beyond another concept. And it's used to complete or add to that original concept. So meta completes, adds, or goes beyond the physical. That means I am full of mind, that's a small m for me, or I am individualized, unique, sometimes we describe it. And I am full of mind, capital M, the eternal creative energy. Another way of saying that, which those of you who know me know I do on a regular basis, another way of saying this is that mind, capital M, is in every cell, every organ, every system of this magnificent thing I call my body. When was the last time you called your body magnificent? Good for you this morning. If you haven't done that already today, be certain you do before the sun sets tonight and every day. It is magnificent. Think about it. And in that knowing, you and I can progress to reading, listening to, and learning the words of those ideas which have preceded me in my knowledge, my understanding, my development of mental and spiritual tools to support me as a whole person. There's such a body of knowledge out there. Use your magnificent self to tap into it on an ongoing basis. My references, in addition to Dr. Holmes, include books published as far back as 1963. Now, obviously, there is a body of knowledge which goes way back beyond that. However, this is a 1-month series, not a 4-year college major. So I began with a signature book by Reverend Dr. Joseph Murphy, which may be a familiar name to some of you. And the book that I chose to access from Dr. Murphy's group of writings is titled The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. In all, actually, Dr. Murphy wrote 45 books, all in the field of metaphysics. One was titled Nuclear Religion. Nuclear religion. I'm still searching for that one. I'll find it, or one of you will and tell me where. Nuclear religion. And he wrote that book back in the early 1950s. Born in Ireland, Dr. Murphy was raised in the Catholic faith. He became first a Jesuit and then later an ordained priest. And then he left the Catholic order. He came to the United States and he became a pharmacist. His college studies were in chemistry. So that was a logical step for him to go into pharmacy. He started attending a divine science church in New York City while Emmett Fox was its minister. And many of you know Emmett Fox actually through Unity. But he also was in divine science for a while. In the 1940s, Dr. Murphy moved to Los Angeles. And then he found a religious science church with one Ernest Holmes as its minister. And eventually, Dr. Murphy was ordained as a religious science minister. And he then taught at both Holmes Institute in Los Angeles and one in Rochester, New York. Eventually, though, he was reordained in divine science, where he remained in the ministry throughout the remainder of his stay here in this plane of existence. So, why do I use Murphy? Well, as a young man, Dr. Murphy, quote, resolved a malignancy. These are his words, but I love them. He resolved a malignancy by using the healing power of his subconscious mind, which created him, he said, and still maintains and governs all his vital functions. And though Dr. Murphy was a learned man with a PhD in psychology, with a Doctor of Divinity and a Doctor of Laws, as well as ordained in 2 metaphysical teachings, he spoke and taught down-to-earth practicality. And what moved him into and through that was his own experience. Those of you who've been coming here for a while either have had such an experience or you've heard me talk about one or more in a class or on Sunday. The number of people who come into Science of Mind seeking a healing, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, who discover they're in the right and perfect place for that to unfold, who experience it, and then become a part of that body of knowledge that is a positive body of knowledge going out into the collective consciousness. Now, let's move a few years forward to 1989, the year a book titled Quantum Healing, Exploring the Frontiers of Mind-Body Medicine was published. You all know the author. I'm showing you the book. It's Dr. Deepak Chopra. His use of the term quantum in this book denotes 2 definitions. First, quantum meaning sudden change, denoting a discrete jump from one level of functioning to a higher level. And then the second definition, the indivisible unit in which waves may be emitted or absorbed. Deepak, also a prolific writer, has published to date 49 books, including books for children and some fiction, interestingly enough. All 49, however, are based upon his metaphysical approach to life. When I opened that book, in the table of contents, the first part includes 9 sections, and the first part is titled The Hidden Physiology. And I thought that up. I thought that was an original on my part. I'm really grateful, though, to be sharing this expression of spirit with Deepak. 1989, he already had it on paper. In that writing, he shares story after story, some his own, some repeating what other medical doctors have told him of what was then classified as, quote, this is in quotes, spontaneous remission. If you've ever heard that expression, or you've ever been told that expression, spontaneous remission, read this book. If you've already read it, read it again, because it's the most magnificent unfolding of story after story after story of spontaneous remission that never regressed. So important to realize that. And these stories were about a variety of physical conditions diagnosed as terminal. Certainly, at least without medical intervention, and even probably with it. So Chopra talks about thousands of chemicals that make up the body's chemistry. And he references the balances and imbalances in the body, including the brain. And since he was a practicing endocrinologist at the time he wrote this book, he knew of what he spoke. And then boldly spoke out like this. And this is a quote. To say that the body heals itself using only chemicals is like saying that a car shifts gears using only the transmission. Clearly, it needs a driver who knows what he's doing. Although medicine has spent several centuries trying to hold on to the idea that the body runs itself alone like a self-motivated machine, There must be a driver there, too. Inside us, Chopra says, there must be a thinking body that responds to the mind's, he didn't say brain, he said mind's demands and commands. And 16 years later, Bruce Lipton published Power of Belief, Biology of Belief. So if you only read one section of Chopra's book, Quantum Healing, read the one on the inner messenger. The inner messenger. Let me say that again. The messenger from inner space is actually the way he frames it. The messenger from inner space, where he talks about intelligent cells, localized cells. Read DNA. Stream of consciousness. PET. PET, the acronym PET. PET, which stands for positron emission tomography. No wonder they call it PET. For the layman, so to speak, that translates to photographing a thought's tracks in 3D. Photographing a thought's tracks in 3D, like a hologram. And 16 years later, Bruce Lipton wrote The Biology of Belief. 4 years after that, Andrew Newberg published How God Changes Your Brain. Do you see the progress there? Gives me chicken skin to see how one thing builds on another and expands. So this is what I call standing on the shoulders of the geniuses who came before us. How blessed we are to have those who walk the scientific path and the spiritual path as one path, searching and refining the value of each in the other, and then to share it with us. So I'd like to close this morning by referencing one other book. Takes both hands. It's heavy. Another well-known writer who is primarily a journalist. His name is Bill Moyers, and the book is titled Healing in the Mind. Bill Moyers' name is undoubtedly familiar to many of you from the world-renowned series that he did with Joseph Campbell on the power of myth. We will visit Moyers' work again during this month because, as you can see, there's a lot in here. This was published in 1993. It's rich with interviews on the art of healing from within, and voila, the mind-body connection. In that section, the mind-body connection, he interviews Margaret Kenemy on emotions and the immune system. He interviews David Felton on the brain and the immune system. And then Robert Adder on conditioned responses. The body and the mind. Healing the mind. So this week, as you contemplate the magnificence of those who have gone before us to blaze this path of uplifting our individual consciousness and the collective consciousness of the entire human race, remember, that's who you are. A member of the entire human race. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And it's magnificent. And so it is.